It's our community, and the neighbors are all here, Gennifer. Hi. The neighbors live in all of our community, and we invite interesting people in. And our guest today is Gennifer Albin. And Gennifer is an author. She wrote a book called Crewl, C-R-E-W-E-L. I probably get all confused here. And this is, we're going to talk about a Creweler in just a minute. And some of these people do Crewl work out there, I'll bet you. And when we get around to it, they'll find it of interest. But this is a book that's written for, what, upper teenagers, middle teenagers?
You know, I have everyone from 10-year-olds to 80-year-olds reading it.
Oh, good.
So
I'm in that group.
It's considered teen, but...
That's right, that's right. Well, I have to tell you, I enjoyed the book. I did.
Thank you.
But I think that there's, as you can see, I've read it, and there's a lot to talk about. So I think we will get right to it. And as we go along, you need to know that this is a book mainly about girls and spinsters, but not a spinster being in our general definition of the term, but these people, these young ladies, spin.
Right.
And they are rather held on a pedestal. They're chosen. And they're chosen to be chaste and well adorned, and they are at a certain point in their lives retrieved. Right. Retrieved. So, with that in mind, the prologue, let's start there. Okay. It says, they came in the night, and once families fought them, neighbors coming to their aid, but now peace has been established and the looms are proven. Now keep the looms in mind. Girls pray to be retrieved. They still come at night, but now it's to avoid the masses with eager hands. Everybody wants to be a spinster. They want to be retrieved. They want to be chosen. It's a blessing to touch a spinster as she passes. That's what they tell us. And no one knows why some girls have the gift. Sometimes it's passed down genetically, it's thought, or that girls with an open mind can see the weave of life around them all at all times. Even that it's a gift only given to the pure-hearted. But I know better. She says it's a curse. Now, the plot thickens. And, you know, there is one young lady that thinks it's a curse. What was your thinking? Here is one young lady. They're all, what, 14 years old?
They're 16.
They're 16.
They're 16.
Okay. Here is one that has everything before her. She has talent. And it's recognized. She doesn't want to be a spinster. She doesn't want to be retrieved. Why would any young girl not want to be just like all the other young girls?
Well, I think when you continue the prologue, you find out that her parents have really pushed her away from this lifestyle, and they've taken the shine and gloss off of it for her and kind of showed her the ugly truth behind it, that these girls aren't really happy. These girls are captive. They are put on a pedestal, and they are put on a pedestal that is actually a tower that they're locked away in. And we start the book with Adelisa, who is the main character, with her thinking that this is because her parents don't want her to go away from them and never come home again. And as we go along the book, we find out that there's much more sinister machinations in the politics in the whole world.
Well, are you telling me that all that glitters is not gold?
I am telling you exactly that.
Well, and you make the note, which I think is sort of interesting, just a small digression, that some girls can see what you call the weave of life, and some cannot. Some people can see different definitions, perhaps, of the weave of life, and some cannot. And some, as they weave reality in this world that they are retrieved into, they do it at the bidding of a central authority. So the talent is not left to be creative.
Right. It is very patterned and it is very focused according to the desire of the guild who controls them.
Is that something of a comment from you about life in general?
I'm sure it is. I have very contrasting political views, I would say, most of the time. But I think that I think we all come to a certain point in our lives where we look around and we say, how did we get here? Why have I taken this office job? Or why did I go into this specific career path? Or my boss controls everything I do. There's no creativity in my life. And it's something that I think we struggle with as we're coming into adulthood, that sense of like wanting to be ourselves and yet needing to fit into society in order to function and have a healthy life. And so Adelise is really in that predicament of she needs to fit within society and her place within society.
Or she sees it, as she sees it.
Right, as she sees it.
Yes, yes. Well, you know, life is kind of a push and a pull and a tug and a struggle and a this and a that. And I need to tell you that this is Gennifer's first book.
It is.
And it was inspired by a painting. She decided she wanted to write a book.
Right.
And this painting is by Remedios Barro, and it's called Embroidering the Earth's Mantle. And you mentioned the fact that you were obsessed with this painting. What about this painting attracted you? It's rather surreal.
Yeah,
for
it's a very surreal painting, and I am really very attracted to all of Varro's work.
Who happens to be a woman, by the way.
She is a woman. She is a Spanish surrealist. All of her paintings have this very haunting, beautiful quality, and a lot of them play on psychoanalysis. So I came across this painting when I was reading The Crying of Lot 49 by Thomas Pynchon for the first time in undergraduate. And my professor actually pointed out all of these subtle nuances to this painting and to the two paintings that accompany it, being that there is one girl who is not going along with the flow of what she's supposed to be doing. There's one girl whose eyes stay averted. You can actually see her. She's the very first one on the right, and she's looking at us. And if you actually can zoom in on the painting, which you can't, but if you were to go online and find it, she's embroidering herself. And I think that's an incredibly interesting thing. And I've loved this painting for a long time. I got to study it again in grad school when the same novel came up in a seminar, and I wrote a 20-page paper, a seminar paper.
Probably the best thing you ever did.
Yeah, probably on Remedios Barro and on this painting and surrealism.
But see, I thought it was interesting because this painting gives the impression of isolation too.
Right.
And there's another one that Barro did that I want to show you and to have you talk about it. And it's a city. And the city is round, and it gives me the impression of Eris.
It's funny because when you brought that up this morning when we first met, I said it's kind of like all of Varro's paintings are floating around in there, influencing me, because it wasn't something I was conscious of at the time. But as I'm looking at this, and I am familiar with this painting, what I notice about it is that the world is completely contained. And that is something that becomes very important about Eris. If you're going to weave reality, if you're going to control reality to that extent, everything has to be contained in order for those machines to work, in order to be able to do that work.
I would like to pull out a couple of threads there.
Okay.
One is reality and the other is contained. Reality varies with the person.
Right. Exactly.
And so what is reality to me may be illusion to you.
Right.
And if you really want to establish what reality is, hidebound, then you have to contain it.
Right. Right, exactly. And that's exactly
what they have done.
What is going on.
Yeah. Well, you know, this is really kind of interesting too. A lot of girls want to be spinsters.
Right.
But there are some requirements.
Yes.
Many are chosen, but few are spinsters. And some girls can see the weave of life and some cannot. Some weave reality at the bidding of a central authority, and some are not willing to do that. But what happens to the retrieved? I think it's appropriate to make this comment. What happens to the retrieved and the spinster unchosen?
Those who are retrieved and taken to the Coventry, because of the nature of the compound that they're kept in and the things that they are shown during their training, they can't ever go home again because they understand things about the nature of the world. And if we can go back to the idea of keeping it contained so that you can dictate reality, it's very important that the knowledge of how this world actually functions is contained. So they are kept there and they become various levels of servants. Some of them scrub toilets, some of them make clothing for the other girls. So there's this whole class of female servants that serve the spinsters who came to the Coventry that were retrieved with very high hopes of what they were going to be, and now they're made to serve the other girls.
See, the one thing I like about this book is, if you think about it, it keeps pulling you back to where we live in the reality of our life. Because, you know, when girls are young, as this young lady is, they have high hopes and they have big dreams, and sometimes they get pulled back to reality. Now, there are some trade-offs if you wish to be a spinster. However, once you become a spinster, there are no trade-offs. That's it. You cannot trade one thing for the other. This is what you say about that. It says here, the guild has absolute power over us and the spinsters. Every girl learns that early in the academy. But someday, she says, my parents will explain what spinsters really do, that no matter how good their intentions, with absolute power comes corruption. That's you speaking.
That's probably every high school history teacher I ever had speaking.
Probably. Probably. And then you say, can a life providing food and safety for others be bad? Well, answer your own question. Do you think so?
That's really hard to say because I think, you know, and we just came out of a presidential election season, so this is a thought that comes up a lot these days. I would say for me it always boils down to intentions and whether your intentions are for the external good or for the internal good, meaning are you acting politically, are you motivated politically for your own power and ambition, or are you entering the public sphere to help and take care of others? And I realize there has to be some crossover there, but I think those who try to seize absolute power, and I think history has shown this time and time again, are not interested in seizing absolute power for the public good. They are interested in it for personal ambitions. And they may provide things that seem great. They may provide safety and jobs and whatnot, but that doesn't always mean that it's a good thing. And that's something that this main character in this book really has to grapple with.
Well, yes, and the reader has to grapple with as well. And the one person with the most talent, Annalise, doesn't want to be there.
Right.
And she said this, and it's very interesting. She has been taken to the loom for a test. And of course, she has been retrieved. They were just delighted to have her because she has a very interesting talent. She was taken to the loom with it. She said, I had no idea what I was doing. I say, and in truth, I didn't. I'd never used a loom to weave before, and something about seeing the fabric of life, the very raw materials that compose the space around me, laid out before me, rattled me. And I think we all get rattled with the threads of life from time to time.
Absolutely.
Well, let's talk about Annalise for a minute. Annalise has this very interesting ability to weave the threads of life without a loom.
Right.
She would be the choice. There's only one Crewler, by the way. Lots of spinsters, but only one Crewler. And she would be the Crewler to be, because the Crewler present is Laura Sell, and she's getting a little elderly. However, in eras, you know, you don't get old. You have little creams and things. I'm looking for some right as we speak. But, you know, to put on your face. Why would a person with all that talent and that bright future laid before her say, I don't want to be here. I want to get out of here, and I'm going to get out of here as soon as I can and quickly. Why would that be?
Well, I think that Annalise really struggles with the idea of dictating other people's destinies and controlling everything, especially when it comes at the whim of her government, who she does not always agree with, because she sees them for what they are. She has encounters with them. She sees why their ambitions and why they act certain ways. And it's a conversation that she continues to have with Loracelle the Crueler as she's being mentored about making those difficult decisions, and how it is, in a sense, a bit of power to be in this position, that she can stand up for herself more, and yet, is it still a life you want? One of the things we're going to find out throughout the series, because this is a 3-book series, is that Loracelle is even a little bit older than we thought, and that she's really, really had a long time to be dealing with this issue and thinking about the good of the many versus the good of the one, or herself. And so she sees in Annalise that hesitance to completely give up her own autonomy, to constantly be fighting for everyone else who seems happy to be complacent and taken care of. And I think that that's troubling.
You know, there is something to be said for trading meaningful choices for the safety and security of Eris.
Right. Yes, exactly.
I mean, there are people sitting out there listening to us that say, you know, that wouldn't be such a bad deal.
And it's probably not. And I think that it's definitely something she's dealing with in the second book, which I'm working on right now, really seeing some of the repercussions of when you make the other choice. And
yeah, well, and let's take a look at Loracelle, and let's talk about the fact that there's only one Crueler.
Right.
And that person is chosen how? From the Spinsters?
It's more about an ability than it is about necessarily being chosen. So, for instance, Loracelle has been doing this job for a very long time, and she's been enduring renewal patches and whatnot to keep her.
Those appeal to me, actually.
They kind of appeal to me, too.
Right.
But she's been, you know, enduring all of these things to keep her alive so that she can continue to keep the world functioning, while she is supposed to be also looking for a replacement. And
this girl can weave without a loom.
This girl can weave without a loom, and that is incredibly important. We don't actually get to learn the true nature of why they're able to do this in this book. It is something that
you're thinking on at the
no,
moment.
it's revealed in other books. I know how it works, but
I'm interested in the renewal patches. If you have any extra time,
there'll be more of that in book 2 too. How that works exactly, that becomes really important. But it's about having this ability to weave without a loom. It's about being able to really see the actual organic composition of the universe around you.
Well, and to see the big picture.
Manipulate it. And to see the big picture. And I don't think it would be...
Because Loracelle makes some very, very critical decisions as she...
I don't think it would be out of school to say that there have probably been others that could have taken this position that Loracelle said no, and kept that a secret and did not push them forward, because it has to be the right person to make that choice. But
we're talking about leadership here.
We are.
And leadership is a very tricky position to put somebody in if they don't have all the little pieces that you can put together.
Right. Well, I think often, and this is something that Loracelle understands, the person that is best suited to being a leader is often the person who resists being the leader.
I think so.
the person who jumps up to do it, you should be a little wary of.
And you need to have a little bit of a flutter in the heart because it keeps you on your toes, I think. Now, the one thing what I found interesting, once they become a spinster, they wear makeup and beautiful clothes and high heels and all the things that hurt your feet and all this kind of business. And Annalise has been remade. And she says, standing, I take a few steps forward to touch the cool glass. I've never spent much time at the mirror, but it's comforting to stand here now. 100 images of me gazing back, proving my existence. I think that's a very interesting sentence. I turn my name over in my head and try to attach it to this woman with the scarlet hair that drapes down against her snowy robe and emerald eyes set back by dark gold lines against a smooth, sculpted face. This stranger, myself, Annalise. Young girls going through this stage in life, I think that's really what they see. They look in the mirror one day and they see themselves changed as they begin to become a woman. Well, and their life changes.
Well, and I think that there are many moments in your life, too, as a young person, where you look in the mirror for confirmation of a change, that you feel so much internally, but you don't necessarily see it. The person reflected back is the same. And this had to be a very specific moment for Annalise, that her world is now completely different. Girls who have not gone to be tested for retrieval are not allowed to wear makeup. They tell them they need to be pure, both in their body and their face, sexually. And they really, really keep a tight leash on these girls, dictating to them a sense of morality and a sense of aestheticism, that then when they are retrieved, or alternatively if they're not and they go into the working world, they're given cosmetics and beautiful clothing and high heels, and they're told this is what it means to be a woman.
Yes.
And I think that's really very problematic, isn't it?
Well,
but
it
puts
is.
That idea, that feminism, up on a pedestal.
Well, it does. And sometimes that pedestal gets knocked out from under you, and it's not much fun. But as, one of the other spinsters whispers in Annalise's ear, she says, you have power. You have power. And you can do which few can. But she says, you must not presume that you are in control.
Right.
Wonderful. I mean, once we presume we're in control, even at this late date in my life, I find out that that is not necessarily true. That is not necessarily true. When you put together the people around Annalise, they're different. Enora, let's take Enora, because she represents another part of this book is full of messages, full of messages. And Enora is her mentor. Talk about her a little bit.
Enora is, she's kind and she's smart, and I think she understands what Annalise's struggle is, because Enora herself has secrets that she has to keep in order to survive, not just within the Coventry, but within Eris. And she understands that sense of sometimes you sacrifice in your own happiness for the sake of survival. And so she really is trying to give Annalise someone who can comfort her and answer her questions, but at the same time direct her in a less self-destructive path. Because Annalise endures tragedy before she comes to the Coventry. She loses some of her family members. And she's very, very, very angry, and her anger is directed in her words. And she says she puts her foot in her mouth a lot and talks back a lot. And Enora's the one there trying to kind of hold her back and say, rein it in.
Enora
You're drawing attention to yourself.
That's right. Enora says, be careful. If you do not fall in with the other spinsters, you will end up doing the dirty work. And the hierarchy then becomes clearer. And Annalise understands why it's important to fall into place.
Right.
And she chooses not to fall into place, as many people do.
Well, I think Annalise would have been a little more happy to go and scrub toilets or sew clothing and not be faced with dealing with these machinations. But it becomes clear as she talks back and does not fall into place that they have no intention of letting her go.
When you talk about the Creweler, and we've talked about that person having a lot of power, and you call Crewl work, the Creweler, is an act of pure creation. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, Crewl work
Because you feel
itself
that they-
is embroidery.
Yes.
I mean, that's a real thing. And I won't, to those of you out there who do it, I apologize if I just really ruined it for you. Because I don't actually do Crewl work. I
Well,
have
it's a
some sense
metaphor.
of what it is.
I think it's a metaphor.
And it's really a metaphor.
Yes, it is.
But, you know, it really is a metaphor for the womanly arts and the act of creation, which I think is a beautiful thing, and it's something that is very tied up in the idea of the feminine throughout time.
Well, then it takes a very particular person to be the Creweler.
Right, it takes a very particular person to be the
Does
Creweler
that person
because
play
that
God?
person has the ability to really manipulate.
Does that
the very
person play
basics.
God?
Yes, definitely.
Yes. Well, that's sort of an interesting. We also talk about gene alteration in this book. I mean, we don't miss a thing here. Nothing. It's all here. Because it said we can often replace parts of the thread, and threads are people,
Right.
with artificial or donated thread material. It's a science we're still perfecting.
Right.
And so, you know, Gennifer has something to say about most everything here. And that's why I was kind of interested. Women's Lib is another one. She says, the guild is comprised mainly of men, as you know, but they use women for a lot of tasks in the government, spinsters, for instance. But there are other positions like secretaries, nurses, assistants. This information isn't all that surprising or interesting, he says. But, you know, what the Coventry does is something of a secret.
Right.
It isn't all out there. And it's mostly women, except you have a very powerful man in there.
We have a very powerful man in there who, he's powerful in the sense of being ambitious and controlling and demanding without having a shred of ability to work these machines himself. He walked
Exactly.
into a room, he wouldn't even see anything on him. But, and yet he controls so many fates, and we see how ambitious he is, because he's not the person that's entirely in charge of the world yet. But
You said
there's a
yet.
definite
You said
power
yes,
play
yes,
going
yes,
on here.
yes.
He's moving to take over that position, and he wants to use Annalise to achieve that.
He does. And but he also, you know, the spinsters do not procreate. They don't have children. They don't get married. They're supposed to be chaste. But he has decided, because events may be changed, to protect the innocent. No, events may be changed. And he has decided that perhaps that he and Annalise should marry.
Yes.
That didn't go over so big.
That didn't go over so big with her, no.
Because?
Well, he's much older. We don't really even know how old he is, because he's been taking advantage of all those renewal
patches
patches.
that I'm looking for. That's right.
I always kind of thought of Dick Clark when I was writing this, like, how old is Dick Clark?
That's right.
But Cormac is actually much more handsome and very charismatic, and in my head I kind of see like a Robert Downey Jr. character. But it doesn't go over because he wants to, essentially, he blows the lid off the whole purity standards bit that they've told these girls their whole life, that they can't have sex and they can't marry if they want to continue into this position of power. And he says, that's not true. We just tell you that to control you more. We can do that, and now I will marry you. Which is problematic because he is unnamed age and she is 16. But also I think it's just really that she doesn't share his ambition. I think there are other girls her age who might leap at the chance to be Cormac's wife. And that's exactly the reason I think he's attracted to her. Not just because she's powerful, but I think he actually kind of appreciates having a woman who's not simpering around him all the time.
Well, and Annalise has another interest.
She does.
Yes.
Which might have more than one.
Yes. So these two young men hold a kind of an interesting talk about the position of these young men in the Coventry, in Eros.
Someone asked me once how it's possible to have men in this Coventry because, you know, if they're so protective of these women and these girls, why in the world would they put men in there? And I think it all comes down to that idea of control again, that they have to watch these women, and they certainly aren't going to count on other women to do the job. But they occupy positions of being assistants to very high-level spinsters, to people who train, and also her main love interest is a valet, and his job is just to run the day-to-day tasks. Traditionally, it would be more of a butler role.
But he is very interesting, and I would suggest to you that this book is one you might enjoy reading. It's talking about power and control and gender roles and sexual orientation, and I would have to say, as I thank Gennifer Albin for writing Crewl and letting me read it, I would say to you, is it real? Is it an illusion? Does illusion ever blur into reality? Can we keep our head when all about us are losing theirs? And I would quote you the last line in the book that Gennifer wrote, and it says, "To be continued." Thanks for being here. It's been a pleasure, and it is our community, and Gennifer Albin is our neighbor, and you need to read her book. It's called Crewl.
Thank you.